outliving conditions have been countered with protests in support of the monarchy. And finally, Yemen, where opinion remains split between political opponents of the president and his supporters. So, weeks of momentum from the demonstrators. The big question now is the extent to which they can keep carrying it forward. Adrian.
Lawrence, many thanks. Let's focus in once again on Libya. And AlJazeera has a dedicated website for receiving video from those who are close to what's happening there on the ground. This next report by AlJazeera's Tarek Baisley uses some of that video and shows oil facilities burning in the east of the country.
A Zuatina oil facility 130 kilometres south of Benghazi on fire after fighting. This video sent directly to Al Jazeera was shot on Thursday. The port is a vital piece of the country's oil infrastructure. It's now under the control of government forces after they apparently tricked guards into letting them into the facility.
We came to the gate of the facility. We told them we were pro-Gaddafi. They invited us in, and then after we sat with them, we mugged them. We used our knives and managed to capture these weapons. They're not Libyans. Some of them are from Chad. All of them are from outside Libya. We've seen their IDs. They're not Libyan.
In nearby Brega, another key oil export terminal, fighting has continued in and around the facility. This vehicle reportedly used by mercenaries guarding the gates to the terminal. There are reports that many of the wounded and killed have been hit with high-caliber anti-aircraft ammunition.
The number of the people that are killed were more than the number of the guys that reached the hospital injured, and this do not happen. Usually have the number of the guys injured is much more than the guys killed.
There are estimates 80% of Libya's oil fields are now under the control of anti-government forces. They risk their lives to take them and say they would do so again to bring down the government and secure the nation's future. Tarek Baisley, Al Jazeera.
Joining me now in the studio is Sharif El Moussa, political science professor at Georgetown University here in Doha. Thanks for being with us once again. Sir, another Friday, another day of protest right across the Middle East region. What do you make of it?
Well, what it is saying is that the Arab people are determined to carry on with the changes they said at the beginning they were going to want to make. And so this is really, well, it shows determination, persistence. Well, it shows that they still, even in places like Egypt, where the regime, or at least the head of the regime, had changed, they still do not trust that the process of revolutionary change is going to be smooth. And they are going to pursue what they set out to do from the beginning.
And is this a process then that is now unstoppable? How long do you think it's going to take to play out?
Well, I mean, like if you take Egypt, we have just begun, really. It is the first step, it's a giant step, but still there is so much left to do and so much to go. It is not only, you know, like in a place like Egypt, it's not only really the top, you know, part of the government, but there is what I call pyramids of unaccountable power everywhere in society, in the university, in the railway authority, in the police station, in the local council, everywhere. And these have to change because the regimes have been there for a very long time, and they have nested, you know, nestled everywhere, essentially. Their supporters, their men, so it is really a long process.
And how do you think Western governments in particular are viewing what's going on in the Middle East? The United States, of course, for so long, such a dominant player in the region, showing yesterday its reluctance to get involved militarily in Libya with the imposition of a no-fly zone. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, the U.S. really hasn't been consistent in its conduct. With Egypt, they waited and waited and waited before they urged Mubarak to step down. With Libya now, we hear sometimes about military intervention, and I think the Americans should step aside and not intervene at all militarily in the region. We have two disasters for both the Arabs and the Americans in Iraq, and for the Afghanistan is not an Arab country, but we have a disaster in Afghanistan. So I think the best thing for the Americans to do, if they want to do anything political, yes, but militarily, I think they should stay out.
Even if the situation descends into chaos in Libya, into civil war, and more civilians are being killed?
That even will make it worse, you know. I mean, like now we're talking about no-fly zone, right? A no-fly zone could be enforced by Egypt, by Turkey, for instance. They need a Security Council resolution to support this, but Egypt and Turkey can do that without anyone intervening militarily directly in Libya, because we know that just will make things worse.
Do you think that there would be any sort of consensus at the United Nations for any sort of military intervention?
I think the Arab countries do not really want Western powers to intervene. So if there has to be any kind of intervention, you could supply, you know, the revolutionaries with material, with no-fly zones, but you don't need to send actual forces, because they see if the rebels, you know, have a lot of support, they are going finally to close in on Gaddafi, especially with all the embargoes and the political defections and the political siege that he's being exposed to.
Sharif Al-Musa, for the moment, many thanks indeed. Now let's bring you up to speed with what's happening elsewhere in the world. Islanders in Taiwan say that they feel threatened by China's plan to boost defense spending by some 13%. Now, Beijing emphasizes that it's not a threat to anyone, but Taiwanese are calling on the United States to sell more weapons. Japan and the Philippines are among other countries who are alarmed at Chinese warships near their coasts.
Since the NPC session has not yet formally opened, if it's approved by the upcoming session, the defense budget for the year 2011 will be around 601.1 billion yuan.
Gary Lai is a research assistant for Chinese defense and diplomacy at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London. He says that China's military budget hike isn't as big as it seems.
I think we need to take things into perspective here. I think the 12.7 increase is actually more or less the standard rate of increase China has adopted since 2000. The only difference is that last year, during the economic recession, where China was really feeling the bite, they decided to lower the increase to 10%. So this is really getting back to a normal kind of level of development for the PLA. I do believe that there will be other elements in the Chinese budget that ought to be included in the published budget. But then having said that, many militaries have also side budgets as well for military R&D or civilian integrated technologies. So it's not just China who has this so-called secret budget. But even having said that, even though if you factor in this alleged 1/3 or 1/2 more budget than they actually declared, China's budget is still significantly lower than many Western nations, and especially the United States.
9 people have been killed in a bomb attack on a mosque in northwestern Pakistan. 30 others are reported wounded.